Welcome to Her Remarkable History. Remember, to support our channel, please subscribe. The Forgotten de Medici that met a horrific end. One of the most influential families to have a foothold in European politics in the 15th and 16th century was the Medicis. The family funded the Medici Bank, which became the largest in Europe during the time period, and it facilitated the Medici's ride to political power in Florence. The family produced 4 popes of the Catholic Church and 2 queens of France, as well as many dukes. Their wealth and influence was unrivalled, and influential members such as Catherine de Medici, the Serpent Queen, was a notorious queen of France who was also linked to much bloodshed. However, there was one member of the family that has often been overlooked in history, and he met a rather bloody end, as he was assassinated. But he was the first Medici to rule Florence as a hereditary monarch, and he was a power player in the 16th century. But what is the story of the Forgotten de Medici? Alessandro, the Duke of Florence. Alessandro de Medici was born in Florence on the 22nd of July 1510, and he was recognised as the only son of Lorenzo II de Medici. Others thought that he was the illegitimate son of Giulio de Medici, who would later become Pope Clement VII. This was the pope who oversaw the Catholic Church when Henry VIII would break away, as the English king would not be granted a divorce from his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. Alessandro's nickname was Second Moro, and many historians believe that he was the Pope's son after he slept with a Moorish slave from Naples or a peasant woman. His mother was later identified as Simonetta da Colvecchio, and the rumour of him being the son of a slave was a false rumour spread by a number of his enemies. Alessandro spent his early life in Rome, and he was given a great humanist education by Valeriano, and the Pope and the future Pope, his possible father, would oversee this. There were a number of deaths in the family which shocked, and with this, his father, who was a cardinal, then relocated the Medici heirs away to Florence for their safety. The title of Duke of Pen was purchased for Alessandro by his father from the Roman Emperor Charles V, and when his father became the Pope in 1523, he left the leadership of Florence to his son, Alessandro, along with Ippolito de Medici. The pair would argue greatly with a papal representative, Cardinal Silvio Passerini, who was told to keep an eye on the pair. Passerini became an unpopular figure, but Alessandro was criticised during this time, and it was said he was not worthy of the Medici name. When the sack of Rome occurred in 1527, a faction of Florentines overthrew the Medicis, and they instilled a republic. Alessandro was advised to leave the city with the cardinal, and a number of the family's supporters fled to Florence. However, the 8-year-old Catherine de Medici was left behind, and Alessandro then spent the next 3 years living in exile. However, in 1530, following a 10-month siege of Florence, which was backed up by Spanish soldiers, Alessandro returned, and he was made the head of state for Florence. Pope Clement chose him for the position, and Ippolito was made a cardinal to appease him. There was tension between the cousins, and Ippolito would mention how he wanted to overthrow Alessandro and be the one who would rule and lead over Florence. Alessandro came to Florence to rule on the 5th of July 1531, and 9 months later he was made hereditary duke by Emperor Charles. This would begin over 200 years of Medici monarchy, and the Florentine Constitution of 1532 made his rule stronger. His father, Pope Clement, would help him rule and would appease people during his lifetime, and he later ordered the construction of Florence's Fortezza di Basso to secure the Medici's control of the city following the siege. This would also act as a place where soldiers would be based and live. Duke Alessandro did receive praise and criticism though, and some believed he did have a sense of justice. He was a patron of the arts and was said to have been a man who helped the poor, but others criticised him, saying he was power-mad, harsh and depraved ruler. It was claimed he was part of the assassination of his cousin, Ippolito, who was en route to meet with the emperor to question Alessandro's government, but he got sick and died. Many believed that Alessandro had him poisoned. However, in 1537, Duke Alessandro would also be the target of an assassination. The Duke's close friend and distant cousin, Lorenzino de Medici, also known as Bad Lorenzo, assassinated him. On the evening of the 5th of July, Lorenzino trapped the Duke through enticing him with relations with a beautiful widow. The Duke was waiting on his own for the encounter, but during this, Lorenzino and his servant ambushed him, and they stabbed him with a dagger a number of times. Alessandro did try to fight back, and he bit off part of Lorenzino's finger. However, he could not fight off for too long. Duke Alessandro then succumbed to his wounds, and Lorenzino managed to flee. He later declared that he had killed Alessandro to preserve the Republic of Florence, and there were fears of an uprising, and with this, the Medicis wrapped Alessandro's bloodied body in a carpet and secretly carried it into a cemetery where it was quietly and quickly buried. Alessandro de Medici, the Duke of Florence, was the forgotten member of the Medici household and family. However, he was incredibly powerful as the Duke of Florence. He was ruling as a king would, and his actions split people's opinion on him, and some believed he was a tyrant, but others believed he was rather good at what he was doing. He met his end in the bloody manner of the Medicis, as they were a family linked to bloodshed and brutality. And despite being the forgotten member of the family, his death was one which was incredibly horrific. He was hastily buried to quash threats of an uprising. Thank you for watching, and to support, please subscribe to Her Remarkable History. Thank you.